Welcome to the Old Mac Gang. Great guys sitting around talking about Apple news and information for seasoned Apple users. You know, it happens every July. WWDC is a memory. The fall hardware is still months away. And then Apple drops all these new betas, iOS 27, iPadOS 27, macOS 27, Golden Gate, as they're calling it, watchOS, tvOS, and visionOS have all landed together on July 13th. Suddenly the group chat lights up, people are talking about it, and for some of our listeners, you might want to know to beta or not beta. And so our talk tonight is going to be about betas and how we use them and any considerations that you might have for using them. So, public betas are still ones that people are working on and people are testing with. So it's still not the same thing as necessarily safe for those that are cautious. And you might not even notice the differences in the software from the previous version if you load the beta, but we'll tell you a little bit about our strategy and recommended strategies for these. So let's do an introduction with the panel, and we will go with Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter. I'm a 73-year-old Apple enthusiast from Bay Village, Ohio. Very long-time computer and gadget hound. I've spent most of my time with mostly Apple hardware for the last 25 years. I love chatting about the how and why of it all with this old gang and our audience.
Charlie.
Yeah, hi, I'm Charlie Lindahl, a 70-year-old retiree from Texas A&M. I've been using the Mac since 1984, and when I was at both University of Texas and A&M, I supported Macs and had I have a lot to say about things Apple, and I really enjoy being in this group.
Hey, good evening. I'm Chris. I'm a 79-year-old retiree here in Tucson, Arizona. I've been also around the Mac since '84 and spent about 9 years with the Apple user groups, which was really a lot of fun, and then had a unique opportunity to work for Apple for about another 9 years, and then finished off my career doing university IT in a school of education. And so now I'm retired in Tucson, like I said, and playing with all my Apple toys and being a software guy. I'm really enjoying the iOS 27 beta, but we'll get into that soon.
And Bob is not with us tonight. Bob wasn't with us the last show we did, which was 2 weeks ago, because he was being part of his Tucson Mac user group board meeting, which he usually has on the first Wednesday of the month. And then last week, we were all at MacStock by Wednesday. MacStock was a big conference. I don't want to say it was a big conference. It was a great conference because there are about 100 people there. And so that means you get to talk to anybody, learn about anything that you wish. And Bob drives up from Arizona to that, so he was on the road. I was there for some training on Wednesday, and then, on Thursday, and then we had the conference on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It was in Crystal Lake, Illinois, close enough to Woodstock that it's called MacStock, and we have had it in Woodstock, Illinois, a couple of times. This is, I think, my 9th time there. There have been 10 of them. So I missed the first one, and this was really a fantastic conference. We had some interesting people in this one. Well, there's always interesting people. There are always great podcasters, people that you've listened to besides folks on this show, but familiar people like Jeff Gamet, Chuck Joyner, and Dave Ginsburg, Guy Cyril, Adam Christensen, Adam Angst, and Dave Hamilton are the type of folks that kind of aggregate with that, with just and I hate to say it, they're mainly older Mac users. I don't hate to say it, but it's interesting. I would say the average age in that room was we had some good younger folks in there, but the average age I'd say was probably about 60. It was really kind of a nice group. Some of these folks started as hobbyists years ago with the Mac. Well, we had a guest speaker, David Pogue, who did the book 50 Years of Apple. And David Pogue came in and usually does, well, I went up to him afterwards and I asked him, how was this experience? And he goes, like, I was with people that got me and understood it. So when I talked about a story about a historic Mac, people in this room knew about that, so they got it. And he went on for 3 hours straight. And he was telling maybe 10 or 15-minute stories about different things and did the whole kind of Mac legacy. He threw in a couple of songs that he's noted for doing. And he said, I go and I do a book tour at a bookstore, and they want me to do 45 minutes and start signing books. And he goes, this gave me an opportunity to kind of talk to people that I know. And he knew many of the folks in the audience from their history of writing and being bloggers and writing on various past Mac services. And it was just a wonderful evening. It started at 7:30, probably ended sometime with the book signing around 1 o'clock in the morning. Just because there were so many people interested in there. And he really put the time out to do it. So David Pogue was there. And then I want to mention someone else who was I was pleased to meet at macOS Ken. Ken Ray was there. And he was bundled up because it was the coldest conference room in the world. I was in t-shirt, of course. But he was just a wonderful, down-to-earth person to talk to. When I had conversation with him, he goes, it's kind of weird when people recognize you because I don't expect that. But, and not having been at a conference for a long time, he goes, coming to this, people are recognizing me, and I have to remember that and get used to that. But he just got in and, spent time with folks, did a lot of conversations. And actually, he mentioned it yesterday and said that later this week, he'll talk a little bit more about MacStock and his MacStock experience on macOS Ken. He has this wonderful 15, 20-minute show every day where he gives you kind of the daily up-to-date news. But such a nice, charming guy, and it was fun. And then we had people who came that hadn't been there in years that were influential, and it was just wonderful to have them as part of the conference. And again, with about 100 people there, you get a chance to talk to anybody that you want to talk to. So lots of folks asked me about the old Mac gang. I'm at an elevator, coming off the elevator, and I really have to pee. And some guy says, hi, and I go, hi. And he stops me, and I still really have to pee. And he goes, I know you. I know who you are. And he recognized, I think, from watching the videos. So, Lee, if you're watching tonight, thanks for that. And he said, yeah, I love the old Mac gang. And we chatted a little bit, and I saw him throughout the conference. But that was different for me to have that kind of recognition. Other people I know me, but to have someone who is a relative stranger to me come up, and it was very charming, and he I think had a really good time at the conference. But Lee, who has been in our chat room before, introduced himself, and I did make it to my hotel room in time to be able to relieve myself. But Lee was there. And then my wife was on the elevator a lot, and she got asked questions like, who are you? And she would say, and other people would tell her stuff about me. and connections with me. So that was kind of fun for her too. So MacStock happens every July. They've announced that MacStock 11 will occur, and but the dates aren't down. But generally, it's the second week in July or so, and we'll see how it develops and what happens with it. So that was my week. And then I came back and went through a medical procedure today and spent the whole day after that resting and ready to go with this show. So let's talk about the beta releases. And I've got a few things to share with you, and I hope this links up well. So we have some articles. They're very good articles. I tried to get them positioned so they were specifically about the OS 27. And I think all of them are about the OS 27. And then there's one general article about should you update or should you not update. This first one comes from MacRumors, and iOS 27 and iPadOS 27 are now available in public beta testers. And there's a video on that if you want to take a look at it. We have a link here for macOSCompatible.com. Apple releases public betas for iOS 27, iPadOS 27, tvOS 27, and macOS Golden Gate. And then finally, first iOS 20, or not finally, but first iOS 27, macOS 27 public betas are out. But you should still be careful. And this is AppleInsider that's giving some caution. A macOS beta, Golden Gate public beta is now available. This comes from Macworld. Apple's macOS Golden Gate beta is here. Discover new features, known issues, release dates, and whether it's worth installing. Then a question from Geeky Gadgets. Should I install iOS 27 beta? And the real differences between the two betas, where they talk about betas, and I think they also talk about developer betas, which is what I generally run in this. And so you can get an understanding, if you don't know what betas are, by reading this article from Geeky Gadgets that we have. And these will all be in the show notes. So look in the video or audio show notes when it's published, and you'll get these links. This one comes from discussion groups, apple.com, and it's to beta or not to beta. That is the question. And it talks about taking the leap, what that involves, the risk of losing data if you don't back it up. And then another article, should I always update your iPhone to the latest iOS version? This came out in February, so it's a little dated, but it raises the question about updating and what's the convenient time to do this. And it comes from mycomputerworks.com. And then automatic updates and how to set them up are Apple's best defense against delay. Automatic updates protect the iPhone, iPad, and Mac users. This article came out June 27th of 2006. So some information there that you'll find helpful. And we will publish these in the show notes and some tips about that and any other links that we talk about tonight. So when the final version of this comes out, take a look in the show notes of the audio version or the video version, and you'll get these links to go to the sites that I've just talked about. So, all right, let's get down to business. And our first discussion question, and this will go to Peter to start. Who in our group actually runs betas, and on what? Walk us through your setup, primary versus spare device, if you run them on all your devices, and whether this year's unusually stable first public beta is tempting you to break your own rules.
Well, usually I wait for the official release in September, and usually means about 3/4 of the time. And stability isn't the issue whether I jump on a beta or not. When there is some unusually compelling new feature, I go full beta, the developer beta, and so I don't wait for the public one. And I did the same a few years ago when I was eager for universal control, which I liked from the get-go and have used often ever since. This year, I also jumped on the beta because I was very eager to use the improved Siri and Spotlight and speediness of the operating system. So I've been on beta since day one. On the two occasions that I'm recalling now, the two I mentioned, when I've done the beta, I've done it everywhere, all my devices, with the thought that they'll work better together. And the important thing for people to note is I do this with the foreknowledge that some things will not work, and with the expectation that I'll encounter delays and will need to reboot unexpectedly. So what do I do to protect myself? I have one weekly backup, a ritual super duper to a big removable hard drive, and two ongoing backups in place that don't change, any time of the year. Time machine to network attached storage and Backblaze service to the cloud. My iDevices back themselves up to iCloud every night, and I don't do anything special, as I mentioned, with backups when I'm testing a beta OS. And I do recognize that if something were to happen, it didn't happen the last time, and this time there's even less stuff that doesn't work. It's very oddball, odds and ends stuff that doesn't work, and nothing that bothers me. So I think if you know that you might have to revert, then you're okay going to the beta. What about you, Charlie?
I don't run betas because I have one iPhone 16. I do have an iPhone 12, but it's too old to run iOS stuff. I don't have an iPad, which is unusual for this group. And I have some old white MacBooks, which cannot run the latest stuff. And I have one MacBook Pro M1 and a MacBook Air, which also doesn't run the latest stuff. So I don't really want to worry about possible, data loss or anything like that on my MacBook and on my iPhone. At some point, I may be getting a MacBook Pro M5, in which case I'll still have my M1, and I may end up going through that. And I don't think I'm going to buy another iPhone just for running betas. And lastly, when I'm on the MacBook Pro M5, I may just run an iPhone emulator and be able to run all kinds of stuff. So anyway, to you, Chris.
Yeah. One point of clarification. In recent years, the public betas have ended up being the same build as the previous developer beta. The difference, and this is an important one, is there's a buffer there of anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 days that Apple is watching to see if there are any important bugs that somehow got into the build that could be affecting general users. Since the developer betas are really focused on developers who write software that runs on the operating system. So they're eager to get the new developer builds so that they can test to see if whatever was impacting their software has been fixed. And it's a good thing that Apple sort of reviews it. Once in a while, they have either delayed a public beta or simply not had a public beta for a particular release. So like next week, developer beta 4 could come out, and Apple maybe won't have a second public beta until the following week because they're not happy enough with it to make it a public beta. So it's been more of a semantic change, but in that semantics is a certain review space. So anybody who is not a developer is probably going to be better off on the public betas as long as we can wait for them. Now, in terms of myself, I've been a beta tester since I was at Apple. I mean, that's what I did. I did OS software. and on the Apple Care side. And I right now I have an iPhone 16 Pro Max. That's what I use for my primary beta machine. I have an iPad ninth generation entry level, but it's a pre-M machine. So, for instance, I didn't get the Siri app on that iPhone on that iPad because it's too, it's not up to that level. And sort of similar with iPhones previous to iPhone 15, you will get some stuff. And Charlie, it actually does go back to iPhone 11, apparently. And people in the older iPhones are seeing much improved performance. So that may be a good thing. But the one of the reasons why I don't run it on my Mac is because a couple of years ago I got burned and one particular set of my photography software stopped working. And I got in touch with the developer and they said, sorry, we don't support Apple betas. Well, there's a history around that because Apple used to make changes at the last minute and really frustrate developers and cost them extra money and stuff. And those days are long gone. But at any rate, right on schedule, that software started working again with the release candidate. But it was a month later, and so I couldn't use that software. So what I'm driving at here is if you're going to do this on a Mac and you're using particular apps, whether it's Quicken or whether it's, Slack or whatever it happens to be, you might want to just double check on Reddit or some other compatibility list, maybe through MacRumors, that your key software is compatible. Because if it's not, you probably don't want to upgrade that machine until you find out it is. And let's see, I think that over to you, Marty.
I throw caution to the wind and have been doing betas. When they first started offering public betas, I first started using public betas, and then they offered developer betas, and I signed up for the developer program so I could get the developer beta, and then realized the first developer beta comes out, and then a month later the first public beta comes out, and it is essentially, as Chris had mentioned, the first developer beta a little cleaned up. And then, but at the same time, the second developer beta comes out. So I have been throwing caution to the wind and have gone against all recommended urban legend advice and have been running betas and developer betas. Now, caution there is I have new equipment. So sometimes the conflict not only occurs with software, but it occurs with hardware when you're running betas, and that hasn't all been cleaned out. The only time I got burned was with RapidWeaver, which is a website development software, which I've since stopped using because it would not give me cloud connections to save my website profiles on. And if I switched to another machine, I had to bring everything over by hand or by flash drive to get it to run. So I would like to say that RapidWeaver, I left RapidWeaver, but I think RapidWeaver left me. And now I do most of my stuff through web interface like Squarespace and Weebly and Wix. And those don't cause problems. They typically don't cause problems with beta. I'm doing also less web development. So to try and get a little bit more down to earth with this, I have new machines that saves a lot of problems. I also store all of my data off site. So I have backup in the cloud or on hard drives. So I don't have the fear of losing my data or things not working. So with that amount of confidence, then I can go ahead and play around with these betas. And I'm in a position where I'm on this show, I'm on other shows, and I'm with people who've been Mac users for a long time. And maybe like Chris, it's sort of once bitten, twice shy. Don't add the betas because my photography software, dropped out for a month, or they've had similar experiences, but they've had a longer time to have those bad experiences than I have with the ones that I've had. So overall, the developer betas are getting much better, and the public betas are much better. And if you follow any problems that occurred in the developer betas, it will give you a reflection of what might happen or is problematic in the public betas. So in this case, with iOS, with 27, there have been less reports of problems with the developer betas, which gives more confidence in terms of the public betas. So Peter is maybe more likely to run a beta, besides the fact that everybody's crazy about this new SAI, the AI that Apple has finally developed correctly. And maybe we'll get into, I kind of want to wait it to fully develop. I've seen stories already. Let's compare Gemini to SAI. And it's like, SAI is still in beta. Why are you comparing these two? There is no comparison. You shouldn't be making comparisons, but we should talk about SAI maybe on a future show. Me saying all of this might upset a lot of tech folks. I'm not advising this for others, but I like new betas and I cannot lie. So, when a less tech savvy friend or older relative texts you, should I install the new one? What's your honest, no jargon answer? And how do you talk them out of putting on the beta on their only iPhone without making them feel foolish? Peter.
Well, my knee-jerk response is one of caution. I say, don't do it. That's the first 3 words out of my mouth. But then I say the word unless. Unless they're willing to endure some aggravation, unless they're prepared to restore to their pre-beta condition if something goes south. I mean, it's always hard to predict or quiz somebody enough to know what they have that might be a deal breaker for them. But I go through with them what it takes to restore to a pre-beta condition. And I advise them that they might lose some data from the time they were experimenting, and maybe more if they have their backup restoration issues. So I believe in personal agency. Make your own choices. I just want to make sure whoever I advise has the knowledge to make a fully informed choice. Charlie.
Don't do it for the same reasons I gave: stability and UI changes. The other thing is the UIs can, and in my opinion, do change enough that it can confuse people that aren't already comfortable with the iPhone interface, the iOS specifically. And if you can afford to have crashes or changes, then go ahead. But it is a bit of a risk. So, Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, just to add on a little bit to what you said, Charlie, it is a good point about UI changes. And generally, I would say that I generally can, if it's a friend who I know well, I will immediately know whether or not they would fit to be a good beta user or not. And otherwise, if it's someone I don't know, I would say things like, well, to have a good beta experience, you need 3 things. You need curiosity, that you like to do this stuff and dig around in software, even at the cost or expense of having to do with new UI, like Charlie was saying. And that, like liquid glass last year in iOS 26, can really throw people for a curve, throw them a curveball, so to speak. But you need curiosity, time, and patience. And part of the key in this is time. If people have already a hectic schedule or they're very busy, chances are beta is not for them, because the last thing they want is they're looking up their doctor's appointment or they're this or that or the other thing, and they can't do it for some reason. It's like, oh, well, the OS is behaving differently, or wow, what happened? They're definitely not in that category. or if they're not ready for workarounds, or if something stops working. And this is much more likely, in my experience, to probably happen on your Mac because you're running a lot more third-party software there and you're much more dependent on it. Not that you don't have third-party software on your iPhone, but it's generally speaking, you're running Apple stuff. So it's something to really think about in terms of having problems. In the old days, like 10, 15 plus years ago, we could run into some pretty weird situations on betas. But those days are really largely gone. And Apple has way more engineers now. So things are a lot more stable. And there's also the whole sandboxing thing with software programs. And Charlie or Peter can get into that sometime if they want. But it's a little bit over my head. But so that's sort of my assessment. What do you think, Marty?
I'm not running anything mission critical. I don't have the nuclear codes or the cure for cancer on my material. So whatever I have, I'm backed up. And I play with the betas because I'm one of the people who will play with the betas when people recommend not to do it, because I find myself in positions on various other shows where they're like, the new beta's out. Has anybody tried it yet? And I like to be informed at that risk. I would only recommend to folks public betas if I had the confidence in them, like the ways that Chris and Peter have spoken about. You know the person, know what they're capable of doing. I have natural curiosity about it, and I don't want to make the mistake that everybody does, because it leads them into frustration. Liquid glass is an example. Everybody was frustrated with liquid glass. I thought, oh, this is cool. Let me play with it for a while. So for me, again, the guidelines include: do you have a relatively new device? How comfortable are you with it? What's your level of curiosity? What's your frustration tolerance in terms of if you run into something on this that's frustrating? Like there might be a new UI situation, and that means you're going to have to figure out something new instead of coming back and say, I don't like it, without sort of figuring out how to use it or such. And particularly sometimes we work with older users who have a tendency to hang on to their devices. So when you're talking to a group, somebody always has an iPhone 8, and it's like, sorry, you're out of this discussion, and they get a little frustrated because why can't they be in that discussion? They still have their iPhone and it should work on everything. And it doesn't happen that way. So you kind of, before recommending it to anybody or hearing them out, I like to kind of do that kind of assessment to get a sense of where they are with it, where they are with the hardware, their frustration tolerance, their natural curiosity, and are they kind of willing to learn new systems, because that's hopefully what they'll see on this, not just everybody's talking about it, so you need to do it. So, third and final question for this group. If you had to hand a nervous, non-technical user a single simple rule for updating software, like update day one, wait till X1, X.1, security only, or turn it on automatically and forget about it, what would you give them, and why is that the right trade-off for them and not for you? Peter.
For many users, I used to say, wait for the 0.1 release, but not anymore. I think most of the version 1 woes are long gone for the average user. Non-technical users, that's what you're asking about, in my experience, don't use much, if any, unsandboxed vulnerable software. So now I think it's okay, probably prudent, for them to set automatic updates on. It's more of a risk of them not updating than it is them updating too soon. And bump up to new versions when they get their first notice to do so. So to go from, one major iOS version or one major macOS version, you're going to be asked and have to do that even with automatic updates turned on. Non-technical users just want to use their devices and they have no desire or little desire to do more or to learn more. And that's not me. So from time to time, my best decision doesn't match theirs. And of course, anyone using specialized or peculiar software needs to check, all the time to see the impact of doing that. A lot of vintage software written long ago will stop working with next year's 28 operating system. So in fall 2027, if it's not updated, you're going to have some things that stop working. Warnings have been appearing and they'll get more frequent over the next year. Charlie, what's your thoughts on this?
We mentioned in the question X.1, and what that means is that they call it a 0.1 release. When an operating system first comes out, it's 9.0 or 10.0 or whatever. And then they usually about a week later they'll come out with 0.1 that's like major fixes and such. And after 0.1, everything's pretty stable. It's usually security updates. So I basically tell people go ahead and explicitly do 0.1 or beyond. The other thing is, of course, to always back yourself up before on a regular basis, just in general. And I would highly recommend the security updates because there has been some nasty stuff coming out. Last thing I'll mention is that you can set an option that says download the updates but don't install them automatically, or you can set it to download and update automatically. And I personally like to just have the download option so that if I decide, oh yes, all of a sudden I want to apply things, I don't have to worry about waiting for it to download. So anyway, Chris, what do you got to say?
Yeah, definitely on the security updates. For those who may not be aware of that, several years ago, Apple split the security updates so that they're really, I think, more called rapid response updates. So that previously, like if we were waiting for 27.1 or 27.2, they're roughly a month apart nowadays, but they didn't have to wait a whole month. In fact, they could put one out in 24 hours and just push it out to the users. And, in the current security environments, that's a good thing. So you definitely want to be installing those security updates. And you'll know that they are because they'll also put them out for older OSs as well if you're following the tech news. So like they would put it out for 26.7 or something, whatever that is going to be in the future. But what I used to do at work for my professors and staff is I would say, Thanksgiving for fall software releases, or after the winter holidays if it was a really risk-averse situation. And for those keeping score, that was usually the .2 at Thanksgiving or the .3 in the new year. And that was generally, this is for folks who, really are risk-averse and they just want to use their machine. But, like I mentioned before, Apple has got way more engineers now and things are a lot different. So the other thing is I will typically install release candidates because they're almost usually the same thing as the final release candidate. And with the release candidate, I get it early and that skip the line and that sort of stuff. One more thing I wanted to mention here, just going through my notes, realizing we've already covered a lot of this stuff. We used to have something called the Spotlight Index, and we still do actually, except it's a lot bigger. And that is That's the river that Siri AI or Spotlight uses. That's the grand index on your device. And when you first install 27, whenever you install it, it's got to do that indexing. And right now with the betas, like I think Peter mentioned, we might have to get on a waiting list for Siri, depending on the new Siri AI app. I was lucky to get mine within an hour because I did it last Thursday before the public beta. But these do take longer. You can count on several days. And for your battery powered items, iPhones, iPads, a laptop, that indexing process will only happen now. Apple changed it. It will only happen with the power plugged in and the machine basically locked. So you're not using it. So they get, that indexing can take the whole machine basically, and it probably will. And so you can count on that taking a little bit longer. There was, I've seen 2 or 3 times on Reddit, somebody would come on and say, okay, every time there's an update, people complain that their iPhone is slower and it's running hotter. Well, that's because your processor's working really hard. And if you simply plug in the iPhone, that indexing and housekeeping chores will take place and process a lot more quickly and efficiently, and you won't have that problem. Well, Apple's gone one step further now. It has to be plugged in and locked before the indexing will happen. Now, what does that mean? It means you'll get more effective searches going through old mail, going through old messages. And, just quite honestly, I have found it quite impressive in the, like maybe 3 or 4 different tests that I've done. It's like, well, last year, friend A sent me something about a movie and it had to do with science fiction, and I have no idea when it was. What was it? And it'll find it, and this stuff is not only a huge time saver, but it's, for those of us who were big fans of John Scully's Knowledge Navigator, we're getting a lot closer. And if this stuff holds up, it is definitely impressive. Marty?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to what everybody said. If I was going to get somebody who was this excited and wants to know when should I update, I would say first of all read about the changes and don't update right away. But there are plenty. You can just do searches to find out what the updates and the changes will be in your system, just by looking at articles on MacRumors, AppleInsider, the Apple support articles, so you know what to expect and what you can do with the new version of whatever you're updating to. Now, betas don't give you everything at once. Betas, you have multiple beta releases before you get to the release candidate or the candidate before the final version. So you might not get all the sweet stuff that you read about that's possible in the new OS as soon as you upload your first beta or switch to your first beta, public beta. But you should read about it so you know what to expect. And so when you go looking for things, you get an idea of where it's gonna be and what's gonna happen. I would tell them to wait for the public beta, read some more once you've loaded the public beta to get an idea of the changes. But when it comes to security, do those updates right away. There have been some major security. There are some bad actors. There's some black hats out there that are using security vulnerabilities, and they're working at it faster than people can repair them. So when you see a security update, before you get caught in something else, go ahead and do the security updates immediately. If you're going to try a new version of the software, go for the public betas, but read what is available for the public betas. Before we finish up, I'm going to ask folks if there's anything that they would like to say about what they're finding if they're running the public betas. Anything else that you would like to add? Yeah, Chris.
Just one thing. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I definitely. I was just watching the latest review from Marcus Brownlee before we came online, and he's right. I mean, the performance is definitely better, and there are just tons of nice little improvements. Every time I turn around, there's a little improvement, and like at WWDC, I think if I remember correctly, it was like 300 different things that Apple had changed, and one of them, when you're sending a text message, and Charlie, I'll let you talk about yours from this morning, but there's an index row at the bottom. So somebody we know on this podcast who's not here tonight likes to use memojis. Well, instead of going through your plus list and scrolling all the way to the bottom, you can zip along this index row and just click on the memoji icon, and you're right there.
Yeah.
And lots of little time savers, lots of little cleanup and performance issues. And Charlie, go ahead. You can mention yours too.
Oh, well, I posted something to our text messages. One thing, and I don't know if it's in the if you need to wait for the beta, but it's certainly after the newest one comes out, you can actually rearrange your text messages. As a matter of fact, there's a couple of apps that you when you have long lists of things, you can move things up to the top and pin them up at the top if you want. So if you know that you're in a conversation with a particular person this week, you can put it all the way at the top and it always shows up at the top. And that's kind of nice. I am very tempted by what I've read about and seen on the Siri stuff, which is only in the beta. And the one that really caught my eye was that Siri is smart enough to look across all your contexts, everything. So, for example, you can say, what are the details of the flight I'm going to take next week? And it knows what next week means because it looks on your local calendar. And that sort of thing, that personalization, I think is extremely powerful, number one. And number two, it's all running locally. That's one of the big things about Siri and the AI stuff. It's running locally on the computer. It's not going out to the cloud. You're not having to invoke your, $20 a month or whatever it is, or your token limits. And that is where Apple is really shining here. And I saw an article today that said that Apple stock went up after the whole thing about fighting the data centers is happening because Apple's not investing in data centers. So they're saving versus Google and versus Microsoft and IBM. They're saving $300 billion, $400, $500 billion because Apple is not doing the data centers in the same way that the other ones are. And this whole thing about having the Gemini thing, they're depending upon the Gemini, the Google data centers as far as the hardware and the networking and so forth. So anyway, I'm looking forward to exercising Siri more, and that's the only thing that I'd be tempted to do with the betas. Go ahead,
Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, well, I would agree with what you've said. I think Siri is a breath of fresh air. I mean, that being said, we've been moaning and groaning about Siri for 6 or 8 years. I mean, it's in comic strips, people make fun of it. I don't think you can make fun of it anymore. It makes mistakes here and there, but so does the competition. It's probably not quite as cutting edge good as Claude or ChatGPT or some of its competition, but it's really usable. And for 90% of the people, Siri's going to be plenty. And that's great. And of course, there are real performance improvements, that's for sure. and I think people are going to be very pleased when they get this new operating system.
Yeah, so as not to trigger other people's devices, I'll refer to it as SAI, which won't
Okay.
trigger all the Apple devices that
Yeah.
might be listening to us at the time. One of the things that I'm aware of is you really do have to wait for SAI to index all of the material that you have, or most of the material that you have, before you see these changes. If you think you've just loaded the beta up and SAI should be working and doing all these marvelous things, it's going to take time to do the indexing. So be patient with that. But once you do have the indexing done, I used it quite a bit with CarPlay this weekend because I was in the car for 2 8-hour drives. And so it worked really well as an interface for CarPlay, and also being able to ask context related questions, which is where it was promised to be, and to be promised to be secure and on device, like Charlie mentioned. I think it worked marvelously. I'm excited about it, and frankly, all the folks that have been trash talking SAI over the years, now they don't remind you that they published that horrible article on it. They just publish an article on how good it is. So yeah, I think there should be some karma that happens with people who were trash talking SAI and now are like all about it and how great it is, versus those of us who said be patient. Apple will get it right, and I think Apple is on the road to getting it right. So let's find out where we can find everyone, and we'll start with Peter.
I am at ppetto, P-P-E-T-T-O, most everywhere social: Insta, Facebook, Blue Sky, Mastodon, so on. I don't frequent them, so you might have to wait a little bit of time. Be patient with me if you send me a message there, but I usually get notices from them when anyone DMs me. Charlie.
LinkedIn at cyberchuck.org is a standard alias that I have for a lot of things, and I consider that to be the main email address. And if you do Google search on CyberChuckTX, I have stuff going back probably 20 years now. Anyway, Chris?
I'm ChrisWesselmanPhotography.com, and on Blue Sky and Flickr, I am ChrisW47-AZ, and on Threads and Instagram, I'm first name, last name, Chris.Wesselman.
Well, that's a wrap for this episode. Beta season is upon us. Proceed with caution. Read about it so you know what you're getting into, and have some fun with it. And use your curiosity to help explore all the new things that Apple's doing with your devices. And most of all, back up and make sure your data is secure in the cloud or off device in case something goes wrong. But more and more, less things are going wrong. That's been the experience as the betas have been getting better and better. Thanks for hanging out with the Old Mac gang, and we'll see you next week. And Bob will be back. He'll be back from the road trip, so we'll have a bigger gang. And you can catch us on YouTube at youtube.com/@OldMacGang, Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, for the live stream. Or later on the channel, you can find other past episodes that we've done, and the episode that we're doing right now will come out an hour after the live recording. And then you can also email us at thepodtalknetwork@gmail.com if you have questions, comments, or interest, or just, hey guys, you're doing a fun job. Most of all, subscribe to us, and that helps us just feel better about the work that we're doing. You can find all of this project and other projects that we do at thepodtalk.net. So thanks for joining us. And again, you're now part of the Old Mac gang.